Are you suggesting that repealing the cap on earnings? Is that what you're suggesting, or a higher limit, or?
I think there are a couple of ways that could be done. It could, the current cap could be raised, or we could stop at the current. It's about 120,000 now, about 118 something. Then we could not increase it beyond that point until we get up to people who are very high wealth individuals and expect more out of them.
Where would you suggest that begins?
Well, I would want to try to get it scored in terms of, what it would take. But that's the general approach I would take, certainly.
Are you suggesting that alone will keep Social Security solvent when it's supposed to run out in 2034?
It would go. We could do that and extend Social Security decades out.
Okay, but so you see no...
Social Security is an easier problem.
Right, but you see no need for raising retirement age,
no,
or reducing benefits,
no,
or increasing the payroll tax.
Increasing the payroll tax beyond...
beyond what we're paying now. I mean, it's been suggested a 2% increase would extend the lifespan for another 75 years.
No, I think. Listen, I'm open to looking at whatever we've got to do, but that doesn't involve cutting benefits, raising the retirement age. Social Security is an easier problem for us to deal with than Medicare in terms of the long-term viability. And so for those who say Social Security is not going to be around, if you're a young person, it's not going to be around, I think that's just scare tactics, and I don't think it's based in reality. I think we can preserve this program for many, many decades, hopefully in perpetuity.
So, Governor, to piggyback on the Social Security question, we hear a lot of suggestions about cutting benefits, raising retirement ages, whatnot. Mm-hmm. We also hear that probably the simplest solution is just to raise the cap on income taxes, so that folks that are making over, I think, maybe $119,000, $120,000, they can.
I think it's a little over $118,000.
Yeah, somewhere in there. They get away by not paying into the Social Security on all that income that they make. That seems to be a simple solution that nobody really talks about.
Well, I think people do talk about it, and I think it could be. It could be done in a way that, $120,000, depending on where you live and how many kids you have and so on and so forth, is not a lot of money. However, if you're making millions of dollars or billions of dollars, then I think it makes more sense to go there looking for additional resources than to go, for the person that may be making $130,000 or $40,000. I am just convinced that if you look at the recent economic history in this country, you see that the very wealthy in this country, and I mean the very wealthy, are getting a large portion of the wealth that's being created. And for the last 30 years, well, beginning probably in the early 70s, the divergence between productivity and wage increase occurred. Prior to that time, as productivity went up, wages tend to go up in a corresponding way. So sometime in the 70s, productivity shot upward and wages remained flat, and in some cases actually went down. I'm suggesting that we look to those who have become exceedingly wealthy and ask them to help this society be more fair and to help preserve vital programs like Social Security and Medicare.
Today you talked to the audience here about retirement security. We talked about the Ohio pension plans being put in good shape. I don't know if you've seen the report that came out from Community Solutions today at the housing conference that has been held in downtown Columbus. Well, the nut of the report is that there's an estimated 191,000 Ohioans that are living on $2 a day. There's 800,000 Ohioans that are, quote, living in deep poverty in Ohio. I know there's a great deal of contrast between yourself and Senator Portman. Is there a great deal of contrast between Senator Portman and Governor Kasich on why poverty's up in the last 5.5 years or so, and why so many Ohioans are living on figures that we normally associate with third world countries like India?
Well, I think what we've seen in Ohio and what we've seen in many other places across this country has been a redistribution of wealth toward the top. In Ohio, I think there's been a shifting of the tax burden from the wealthy to those least able to pay. And the tax cuts that have been made have tended to disproportionately be a benefit to those who are already well-to-do. And I think that's a big problem.
So do you think this report sort of blows a hole in the John Kasich story of the Ohio miracle?
Well, there's all kinds of things that blow the hole in the story of John Kasich's Ohio miracle.
Is it also Rob Portman's Ohio miracle?
Well, I don't know because
I criticize him, so now I'm complimenting him. He showed some fire. Right?
Thank you, my brother.
That's good.
Thank you. Other than Senator Portman's record, which is pretty clear, I have a hard time discerning what his overall concerns are. I mean, I can look at his record. I can see that he's voted for the Ryan budget. I can see what's in that budget. I can see what he's done in terms of trade. I can see what he's done in terms of pay equity for women and all those things. From my point of view, Rob Portman's economic philosophy is consistent with the so-called trickle-down theory, that if you give those who are already well-to-do more, that they will use those resources in ways that will somehow benefit the larger society. I don't think there's a lot of evidence that that approach works, and I think that's what the Republican Party has bought into, so we find ourselves with growing disparity, a wealth gap that is greater than it's been since the days before the Great Depression. I mentioned that book, Dark Money. It's alarming because what you see is that there has been a very planful effort to assume economic control over this country by the wealthiest of the interests. And,
are you switching to a Sanders man?
Oh, I think much of what Bernie Sanders says makes sense to me. I'd love you to read that book and have a cup of coffee and just talk with me about it, because I've only gotten into about page 80, but it is very disturbing. So I think there's been a kind of class warfare going on in this country, but not the way the Republicans like to frame it. The middle class has been the part of our society that has suffered the greatest. I think that's what we're seeing, both in the enthusiasm that Donald Trump gets from his supporters, and the enthusiasm that Bernie Sanders gets from his supporters. They're expressing it in different ways, one on the right, one on the left, but I think it's coming from the same sense of unfairness that exists within our larger economy. I just think it's a very disturbing set of circumstances, and with the decisions that were made in Citizens United, it has opened the floodgates of money coming into our political campaigns. I mean, as far as we can tell, we've had maybe up to $15 billion spent against me already. Only a small amount of that has come from Portman, but it's come from the Koch brothers, it's come from Karl Rove's organization, it's come from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, it's come from the American Chemical Society, it's come from a variety. It's too bad that court decision basically opened the floodgates for special interests, self-serving money to come into our political system.
Governor, I don't know yet, so obviously I haven't had a chance to speak to anybody, but I suggest to push back on what you're proposing today relative to Medicare and Social Security be that it's not dramatic enough, it's not sweeping enough to actually save those entitlements. How would you respond?
Well, I think we've got to do whatever we've got to do to save them. I always feel a little puzzled that programs that benefit regular people are the programs that are considered too costly or not sustainable, or all of those things. We are a rich country. There is a lot of wealth in America. Too much of it has been placed offshore, obviously, but we, I think, are in a position of having to decide what kind of country it is that we want to live in. Do we want to live in a country where older people can retire with a sense of security and not have to live their lives in poverty? Do we want to live in a country where people who need access to health care can get access to that health care? Do we want a country where our young people can get an education and thrive? I think that's the kind of country we want. And if we want that kind of country, then there are actions that we can take that will get us that kind of country. If, on the other hand, we accept the argument that's put forth by the billionaire class, then we'll see escalating income inequity and greater disparity between literally almost a handful of people who control the country and all the rest of us.
Governor, you mentioned a couple minutes ago the word enthusiasm.
Mm-hmm.
Final question for me today is sort of the conventional infield chatter in the Beltway media is that enthusiasm with Republicans is up. Donald Trump takes a lot of credit for bringing new people into the voting booths, as it were. There's a notion that Democratic turnout is down. We're a long way from the convention still, and even longer from the fall general elections. Do you have any worries that Democratic turnout will be anything but robust come November, and that whomever the nominee is, whether it's Mr. Sanders or Mrs. Clinton, Democrats, independents will wake up and...
I really have no concerns about that. I think what we are seeing in the primaries is to be expected. But when the choice, I mean, I don't know who the Republicans are going to put forth. I think it's likely to be Trump or Cruz. It could be someone else, I guess, but I think it's likely to be one of them. If it isn't Trump, I think the Republican Party is in danger of disintegrating and splitting apart in a permanent kind of way. I can't imagine, the Bush family ever supporting a Trump for president, for example. I mean, it just seems almost unthinkable. So I think the Republican Party is between a rock and a hard place. I don't feel sorry for them because I think they created this. I remember John Kasich saying I was Tea Party before there was a Tea Party. You don't hear him saying that now. But they encouraged this Tea Party thinking. They encouraged the outlandish claims regarding Obama's birth certificate and all of that kind of stuff. And they did it to try to win elections and gain power. And it worked for them for a while, and now they've lost control of it. And I just think they are in a very difficult set of circumstances. The Democrats, I think, I'm very pleased with what's happening with our two candidates. I think they're both saying important things. My prediction is that Hillary's going to wrap this up, and that when the choice is between Hillary Clinton or anyone on the other side, Bernie Sanders will be traveling this country campaigning for her.
Well, there's another common theme that says if Donald Trump is not the nominee, that his supporters will go home. They won't vote for whomever the Republican nominee is.
What's that say about the likely outcome of the election?
Which bodes well for Democrats.
Yeah, it does.
There are also the Bernie or bust crowd, younger voters, millennials, that say, hey, if it's not Sanders, I'm not going to participate either.
Well, I remember, I was a Hillary supporter when she ran against President Obama in the primary, and there were a lot of Hillary supporters saying the same thing. And all it took was Hillary getting behind the president, and this Bernie or bust thing, I think, will go bust.
So you think voter turnout will be sufficient in Ohio in November to push the Democrat over and bring you back into the Senate?
I think I'll win. I think I'll win in spite of the fact that I will be hugely outspent. I think we'll win the presidency, and I think we'll be in a position to refashion the Supreme Court. I mean, this Supreme Court issue is, I think, perhaps the most significant issue facing the country in terms of domestic policy. Because with the death of Scalia, and there's likely to be a couple of more openings, that court will be refashioned either in a more progressive way or in a more conservative way. And that will affect the country for generations, not for an election cycle. So I think that's the most serious issue facing the country, and I think it will determine what kind of country we're going to be in the next 10, 20, 30, 50 years from now.
Now that the president's approval ratings are sort of back up to 50%.
Thank you, Governor. I got to scoot. I'm sorry.
Now that the president's approval ratings are sort of back up to 50% again, isn't he sort of the wild card here in terms of the fall race? What would you like to see him do
I think
in his role as president and Vice President Biden? What's their role in...
Vice President Biden has been in Ohio campaigning for me. He's promised to come back. Senator Warren is coming in. Senator Schumer is coming in. Bill Clinton's promised me that he'll come campaign for me. Ohio will get a lot of attention over the next 7 months or so. And I think Ohio will do what it always does, and that's determine who the president is. And I think Ohio could very well determine which party controls the Senate.